One of my favorite topics that Echo, Dr. Glenna Phyllis's daughter, has really done a lot of research and taken a lot of care to is the meeting of the need. And so we talk a lot about how ooh is always the correct response. And then we say, I missed it, what's happening? But then that last question is, what do you need? And I have found that when coaching people, that's a very vulnerable thing for people to even ask themselves. And it's not something that we pay enough attention to because that is the goal. The goal is to get to the need. And so today we have Echo in with us, sharing what she has found and why the need is so important, and also that there's a need attached to every emotion. So that is what we are going to be sharing about today. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open the emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I'm your host, Tera, and joining me is trauma-informed coach, a co-creator of the Connection Codes parenting course, and one of our lead coaches, Echo Hill-Vetter. And we are so glad you are here. Welcome to the Connection Codes.
Thank you for having me. It's always a privilege.
Thank you.
Being with you.
Thank you. I love being with you. I think that you're so insightful, and you played such a role in this work, in getting this information out of Dr. Glenn's head. And it would have lived in there forever if you had not come alongside him and partnered with him and actually helping him get it on the paper. And what I love with you is that it didn't stop there. You got it onto the paper, but then you kept asking questions, and you're like, no, let's dig deeper into these specific areas. And this applies to parenting. This applies to these other areas, not just marriage. And so you've really helped expand this work in a way that's really beautiful and really instrumental for everyone. So I love getting to just pick your brain apart, and that you're here, that I get to do that today. It's just me and you. No offense, Glenna Phyllis. Love y'all.
It feels special.
It feels special.
We don't get this time together.
Yes, and I can really dive in to what's in those crevices inside of your brain. And so, Echo, one of the things I have seen that's a consistent kind of pain for people when I'm coaching with them is helping them get to the need. And even for them to recognize that they have a need, and then the fear of vocalizing the need, even to themselves. So can you help me get to kind of your thought process of when you were doing this work initially, and what that aha moment even looked like for you? To be like, okay, yes, we access the emotion. We process the emotion. We co-regulate. But there's a step further. What did that look like for you?
So I started working with Dad in 2017, and the first thing we created was a workbook, and then that led to a book, and then that ultimately led to the master classes, and then everything, all the projects we're doing now and have been doing these last few years. So for those first few years, it was a whole new education for me from the way that I had grown up, which Dad would say the same thing from the way that he had grown up, right? His understanding of what it means to be human and how we function as humans completely radically changed through him going back to school in his 40s and then learning all of this through becoming a marriage and family therapist. And so he was re-educated. And then in working so closely with him, day after week, after month, after year, I became completely re-educated. And so those first few years, because it's so radically different from so much of what we're taught through culture, through religion, through secular and religious culture, it took a while. There were certain things that it felt like in an instant, right? Like I would hear a certain concept and it just clicked and it made sense. And I instantly felt like I could function a little bit differently or understood it a little bit differently. And then there were other things that I really had to chew on because it's so different from how I grew up. It's so different from the messaging that I'm still hearing all around on television or in community or in newspapers or magazines. It's just so different than where we come from, where so many of us come from. So those first few years, tons of processing, tons of confusion and asking questions and trying to understand. And a lot of it was just around the concept of what is an emotion? And then understanding that emotions are neutral, right? Or you could even say good because they serve a purpose.
Yeah.
So swinging from emotions are bad and wrong to maybe emotions are neutral to, oh, wait, actually, there's a good side. There's a good thing happening here.
Yeah.
That took some time to catch up to. And then it really wasn't until 2020 where I had a lot of, we don't have time to go into that story, my life kind of fell apart, right?
Yeah.
A lot of repressed emotion came to the surface. So many chronic unmet needs I became aware of that year and had to begin addressing because of my health, because of my physical health and my mental health. So that was really the year for me. So after 3 years of being re-educated and trying to understand what is emotion, how does it live in the body, why does it live in the body, 2020 for me was the year that it really connected personally to this is connected to need. And I, as a mom, that was a lot of it. A lot of it was having a lot of kids and not knowing how to take care of myself and my children, right? So that's central to my story. We all have different stories around why we have chronic unmet needs. For me, that was a big part of it. I just never learned. I never learned, again, because culturally, women are not taught how to take care of themselves. We're not taught to prioritize taking care of ourselves. We know how to take care of everybody else. We learn that early and we learn it well, but we don't learn how to take care of ourselves. And so I think I was 36 at the time. I'd been a mom for maybe 15 years, something like that. I had 5 children at the time. I had a baby at the time. So kind of a pressure cooker, right? A lot of mothering, a lot of children, and not knowing how to care for myself for a very long time kind of culminated that year through a mental health crisis and some physical health issues. And so in connecting those two ideas of, okay, processing emotion, first of all, what does that even mean, right? And we try to really break that down with connection codes. Like, what does it mean? And I get that question a lot. Like, I hear you saying process, but what does that mean? What do you mean process emotion, right? Yeah. And so the very first step in all of that is awareness, right? To even know that I'm having emotion. Believe it or not, before 2017, I couldn't identify that I had emotion happening in my body. I didn't realize, like, I knew something was happening, like I'm uncomfortable or I feel discouraged or I'm overwhelmed or I'm stressed. Like I understood that because I could at least feel that somewhat, partly because I feel big, deep, like I'm a big feeler, right?
Yeah.
We all feel, but it feels like I feel big.
Which I think that is such an important point to make. I guested on a podcast yesterday, and she said that she was the person in her relationship that stuffed emotions, but her husband was a big feeler. And I want people to hear Echo say that even though you are a big feeler, you feel things big, that didn't mean you could actually identify what it was you were feeling and how to process it.
Not at all.
It just meant there was a level of intensity happening in your body all the time.
Often.
And so
often.
Just because your partner, some of you are thinking like, oh, my partner, they're the big feeler. They don't need to do this work. They already feel everything. I would say, they got to sort this stuff out inside their body.
Absolutely.
So I'm so glad that you made that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I knew I was overwhelmed basically all the time.
Yep.
I knew I was stressed often. I knew I was in kind of depression, like dipping in and out of depression often. But I could not communicate it well. I wasn't connected enough to my body to really know, something just happened. I was just triggered, right? Yeah. I didn't have that self-awareness. So that's step 1, is becoming self-aware, right? And then so much of this is slowing down and getting curious about our experience so that we can convey it to another person, hopefully a safe person, because that's the only way it works, right? Yeah. But also to ourselves. Like admitting it to ourselves is just as important. And it's a big step. And a lot of us can't even do that, right? Because to admit the truth is too scary. It's too overwhelming. There's just too much pain. And so it feels better, or it feels like it's going to be easier to just kind of turn away from it. That's one of the it helps me to have visualizations for different ideas. They feel more real and like I can understand them better and communicate them better. And so part of what I would say is through cultural conditioning, I kept my back turned to how I really felt or what was really happening for me. really until 2020. 2017 was definitely a shift. Like I started to warm up to the idea of, okay, emotion is real and there is there's a purpose in it. I started to warm up to those ideas. But it really wasn't until 2020 that I would say I fully turned and faced for the very first time a lifetime of repressed emotion, a lifetime of repressed pain. So that alone it can be terrifying. It can be very overwhelming. It can even feel pointless where you're like, why am I doing this? Right? Like, I just want to keep my back turned. That feels easier, safer. Let's just go back to ignoring. That wasn't an option for me that year. And it has now not an option for me anymore. I have to face the truth. I have to face what's real for me now. So that kind of being step 2 of knowing what's happening and admitting it to yourself, and then hopefully admitting it to safe people, whether that's friends, family, practitioners, coaches and therapists, pastors, like somebody who can be safe for you as you are saying what's real for you and what's really happening for you. So that's another huge step in processing, right? But then realizing not really until 2020 that, okay, there's more to this. Just saying it out loud doesn't complete the process. What completes the process is getting curious about what need the emotion is connected to, because that's why emotions exist. If it's not indicating a need we have, what's the point, right? It doesn't actually serve a purpose. It just makes life really complicated and really overwhelming. But it's a message. It's a message from our body, our beautiful, beautiful body, to us to say, you are human, whether you like it or not. And you don't get to graduate from being human. You will be human from the day you are born until the day you die, right? And there are certain things that it takes to be a functional and healthy human, whether you like it or not. I didn't vote for this, right? I didn't vote to have needs. There's many, many days where I would vote not to have needs because life would feel so much easier and more simple if I didn't. So it's not that we signed up. We didn't sign on a dotted line. We were just born. We were born into this situation. We were born onto this earth. We were born into these bodies. So we're not asking for it. We're not voting for it. It's just reality. It's what we were given. And here we are. So we have to figure out, okay, how do we do the best we can with what we've been given? And what we've been given is our humanity. And what we've been given is our bodies, right? And there's a certain list that comes with being human. There's a certain list of needs that comes with being human. And the way we learn what those needs are is we learn to speak the language of our body, and the language of our body is emotion. The language of our body is sensation. So sensation is connected. That's the feeling that's happening, or the actual physical feeling that's happening that indicates, oh, I'm experiencing. So for example, this morning I'm making coffee. We have 100 appliances all plugged in on the counter. And so there's times where I have to undo one and to put in another one because there's not enough plugs. So one of the plugs was hanging over, what was it hanging over? Another appliance, can't remember. And I bumped it, and it was back in a corner, kind of in the dark. And I thought it was a mouse. So I bumped the plug, and I see it just out of the corner of my eye that this little black figure moves. My entire body reacted, right? I could feel tingling in my head. I could feel kind of a catch in my throat. I gasped, right? So my lungs are involved. I could feel a tightening in my chest. I could feel a churning in my stomach. I could feel a tensing in my shoulders. My entire body reacted. And what I know now is, okay, so those are sensations, right? Tingling in my brain, a tightening in my throat, a tightening in my chest, or whatever the word was that I used the first time I expressed it. So there's sensations happening literally from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet in that moment, because I think there's a mouse on the counter and I'm not choosing that. I'm not trying to react. Logically, I know even if there was a mouse, I'm safe. That mouse is not going to do anything to harm me, right? So the logic part of my brain knows that. The grown-up, aware, that side of me knows that I'm safe. But my body, for whatever reason, has the story that there's a threat. And so I feel sensation throughout my entire body. But because I've had this re-education, I'm aware, oh, I just got flooded with fear and probably some pain and maybe disgust, right? Probably all of that, this concoction, this very powerful concoction just got released by my brilliant brain and brilliant nervous system and brilliant body to engage me so that I will pay attention, so that I will do what I need to do to stay safe, right? Like that's the purpose of all of this.
Yeah.
Our beautiful brains, our beautiful nervous systems, our beautiful bodies are here to keep us safe and alive.
Yeah.
That's what all this is. And so they are indicating if there's a need and they're indicating if there's a threat. Sometimes the information isn't accurate, right? So in that moment, not only, first of all, if it was a mouse, I'm fine. I'm safe. Yeah. Second of all, it wasn't a mouse. It was a plug that had just like moved a little bit.
Yeah.
And so the message was still my body trying to keep me safe.
Yeah.
It just happened that the threat wasn't what my body thought that it was.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, and kind of the point in all of that is if we can learn to partner with our brain and nervous system and body and emotion and sensations, that's how we're able to, first of all, thrive.
Yeah.
Right? That's how we're able to connect in relationship. That's how we're able to go after our dreams. Like it's all connected.
Yeah.
And it all starts with partnership. It all starts with partnership with our emotions, with our bodies, with our brains, with our nervous systems. And that is not the education that most of us received.
Right.
Most of us are in, conflict.
Yes.
Right? So I am constantly working against my emotion. I'm constantly working against my instincts, my very, very good instincts. And so I just kind of stay locked in, there's no movement, right? There's not growth. There's not learning. There's not movement. There's not thriving because I'm just staying locked in that tension.
Which we refer to that as resisting our own energy.
Yes,
And so that would be like if you've gone through the foundations course, if you've done any of like the book, that's that phrase.
Yeah.
That is what it looks like to resist your own energy, is to know that you feel something, you feel a sensation in your body, but you choose to, you ignore it, you suppress it, you move on from it. And oftentimes, I love that example of the mouse because it wasn't a real threat. You know, it wasn't even actually a mouse. And that's so real for so many of us. This weekend, Wes's father came and he had the kids for the very first time ever, he and his stepmom.
Wow.
And we have a very beautiful relationship with them. And before they left, he was like, it was just me and him for a second. He was like, I feel like I need to talk to you because I'm sensing some tension. We have different political views. And I had zero tension at all. So I didn't feel like I was giving any energy or anything off because I'm totally fine being in a relationship, you know? And it hit me later. He had tension in his body. And because he ended up saying, he was like, well, maybe the tension's just with me. But before he left, I told him how honored I was that he shared with me the tension that he was feeling. He doesn't have the words for emotions yet. Like that's not a language that he speaks, but he felt tension in his body and he honored that tension. And he knew he was safe with me for whatever reason to be able to share. And so I think that is what people are actually experiencing on the day-to-day level of we are in these scenarios constantly where we're feeling some type of tension in our body, whether it's with our spouse, whether it's with at our careers, our jobs, with our family of origin, just in our home. Like there's just pain in our home that we have tension in that we're resisting. And over time, ignoring, suppressing that tension, that need that the tension is trying to tell you, that's where you can create an excess of pain. That's where you reach the point where your body is breaking down, where you're not sleeping, you're experiencing the physical ailments and also the disconnection in relationships. From the tension. Yes. Yeah. And so I just want to share like some day-to-day examples that people are in every day that there are moments where that fear hits and we gasp and our throat gets tight. But there's also just that tension in the back of our neck. You talk a lot about sensations. So what are some of the sensations that people could experience when they're experiencing emotion?
So some of it we talk about kind of in the trauma world especially is like the idea of acute pain versus chronic pain. So like in that moment this morning, it was uncomfortable to get hit with that much fear, like a heavy dose, a concoction of fear, maybe some disgust, maybe some pain. I wouldn't vote for that. Like, it was disruptive.
Yeah.
It didn't feel good. It kind of made me laugh a little once I realized what was happening of like, oh my gosh, how ridiculous,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So there was some amusement in it, but mostly it was just distracting. And I didn't need that when I was trying to get out the door this morning. So that's what I would call acute pain, like where there was just this instant of reaction. And then I see that, oh no, actually I'm safe. There's no threat. And then my body re-regulates and I continue forth, right? I pour my coffee or whatever I was doing. Yeah. But then we have chronic pain, and I've also dealt with that. So I've had a chronic shoulder injury and a chronic hip injury that kind of comes and goes, but has been there, shoulder since 2015, hip since 2014. And my understanding now from 4 years of studying and becoming certified in trauma-informed care, and then starting to understand somatics and what's happening in the body and how we store emotion in the body, is that it can become chronic pain, right? So even that, we don't talk about that culturally. We've separated mind and body, right? We've said the body's just doing its own thing, and then the mind is who we really are. And that's how we identify. Like, that's where our identity is. It's over here, separate from the body. When in reality, all current research and really ancient wisdom too, the current research really affirms ancient wisdom, is that they are interconnected. The mind and body are interconnected, the brain and body. And so much so that you can't separate them even if you want to. Yeah. And we often want to. Right? I want to be free. I want to be free of this shoulder pain. I want to be free of this hip pain. I just want to do what I want to do. I just want to I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to deal with it. Yeah. I don't want to rest when I need to rest. I don't want to be kind to my shoulder when I need to be kind to my shoulder. No, I want to do my workout. Yeah. I want to go lift my weights, right? Yeah. Like, stop talking to me, shoulder. I want to go lift my weights. So we want to separate from our bodies. And unfortunately, like we were saying, fortunately and unfortunately, like we were saying earlier, we don't get to vote. We're born a human, and we are a human our entire lifetime. And so our option in terms of making the best of the situation is to re-partner. We're born partnered. If you watch babies, if you watch toddlers, they are in their bodies. They live in their bodies. It's why they move in such weird ways, right? Like, my 1-year-old does these yoga poses on a regular basis. Like, he is contorting his body constantly, standing on his head, literally, with his legs in every direction. Yeah. He's just naturally in his body. He's naturally feeling what it feels like. Like, right now I want to stand on my head because that's what feels good to me right now. Yeah. And we so quickly are conditioned out of that. We so quickly learn to separate from our bodies instead of partnering with our bodies. Yeah. And so the more we can re-partner, so come back around to re-partnering. I actually can't even remember what your question was. I tend to go off on, on these tangents.
No,
where you ask, and I'm like, I have this vision for it, and then it reminds me of 10,000 other things. Yeah. So I end up way over in left field.
I love that.
So I have no idea what your question was, other than what keeps coming to mind is this idea of like our mind and our body are one, and we can't separate the two. And so we are feeling emotion. I think I started off talking about the acute pain versus chronic pain. Yep. But both result from emotion, right? Chronic pain is directly connected to chronic unprocessed emotion. Right. And so is acute pain. So this morning with the knot mouse, that was an acute situation. That was emotion. That was emotion getting released into my body to tell me that I needed to create an action, right? And that was something I know you and I were talking about. Oh, I keep hitting this mic. I'm so sorry. We were talking about earlier today, and how emotion is meant to create motion.
Say that again.
Emotion is meant to create motion. Yeah. That's the result. That's where we're headed. That's where we need to be headed. Yeah. So just like this morning, emotion floods my system because my body believes there's a threat. So I need to gear up for action, right? That's what my body's telling me. Gear up for action so that you stay safe and alive. Turns out I'm okay. Yeah. Turns out there's no mouse, and even if there was, it's not going to kill me, right? But my good, beautiful body is telling me gear up for action so that you stay safe and alive. And that's happening all day, every day. Yeah. And so the chronic emotion, or the chronic unprocessed emotion that becomes chronic pain, is where we just didn't have the tools. We didn't have the guidebook. We didn't have the tools to be able to move when our emotion is giving us a message to move, right? And so we live in freeze. We live in the tension. I don't have it in front of me, but like if you picture one of those charts where you see the different layers of the human body, right? So you see the skeletal system, you see the muscular system, you see the respiratory system, and how they all layer on top of each other.
Yeah.
And how, so the emotion is a very real, it's a physiological experience, right? And it's living in the body, and it gets trapped in the body. And so to be able to see those charts and see how the muscular system is affected, to see how the fascia that kind of lives in and around the muscles are affected, to see how the nerves are affected. It's all connected. It's all affected. And when we live in chronic freeze, as I have, as many of us have, we're constantly holding our bodies still when what our bodies so desperately need to be doing is motion, is action, is movement, right? And so the tension of what I needed to do in that moment, if there had been an active threat, was fight or run, right? That's what my body was telling me. You need to get into fight mode where you're protecting yourself, or you need to get the heck out of here, right? And so if my chronic experience, if my daily experience is don't fight, don't run, don't fight, don't run, don't, like, imagine the tension that builds. Imagine what's happening in the muscles. Imagine what's happening in the fascia. Imagine what's happening in the nerves and in the bones, in order to keep myself from moving when my body and my emotions are telling me to move. And then imagine doing that day in and day out for decades.
Yeah.
And then imagine how you're going to feel by the time you're 36 years old, right? And that's where so many of us find ourselves today.
Totally. And I think that we have different responses to different things, because when I think about myself, whether it's the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, I'm a fighter. I'm ready to roll.
So
Girl. Yes. Like,
so interesting.
My son does jujitsu. And I'm like, I think I want to sign up. Like, I think that's a healthy way for me to even get that out of my body. But I was the middle child of one of 5 kids. And so, like, there was a lot of fighting. But there are definitely times where I do freeze, and there are times that I do run. You know, so this morning I was on a coaching call, and I think for her instinct, it may be some level of freeze, but it almost is like run. More of the ignore. I feel this pain, I feel this hurt, so I'm going to ignore. And to me, that reads more as a run versus a freeze. What would you say? Or like,
with the ignoring?
Yeah, like if you're ignoring something, are you running from it? Like you're moving yourself away from it versus freezing in it. And does all of those actions have the same effect on your body? Like it's all damaging to your body when you're not processing.
Right. Because I think the motion that is needed is to meet the need. Right. And so if we are using our energy to ignore, if we're using our energy to avoid
or fight,
even
though it feels good,
which sometimes that is the need. Right. You may be in an actual. You may be experiencing an actual threat.
Okay.
Like that's very real as well.
Yes. But sometimes our threat isn't war. As in, like, sometimes the threat isn't that there's
like
a snake in our house, but it's even with her this morning, I was like, ooh, do you ever show your anger? You know, like, I think that your need is to actually, like, show that you're angry. And it's hard to even separate anger as the behavior versus anger as the emotion.
Right.
Because for her, she was like, you know, I have anger as the emotion. And she even asked, like, but is that bad?
Oh, wow.
Like, ooh, no, like, I want you to get angry, you know? Granted, you don't have to go to my level. I'm not trying to encourage you to fight, you know? But, like, yes, tap into the motion that your emotion is trying to say.
I just finished a book this week, and one of the lines from the book was something like, when I found my anger, I found my will.
Ooh.
And I think of that for myself as far as having lived in freeze for so much of my life, and how for me, because I relate to that completely. Like finding anger is what allowed me to change my life.
It's anger.
Yeah. Well, that's the point of anger, right? Point of anger is to mobilize us. And we need to be mobilized. And unfortunately, we have not seen healthy examples of anger.
Yes.
So most of us, when we hear the word anger, we hear harm and violence. And unkindness. That's what we hear when we hear the word anger. When in fact, those are just actions that end up happening that are not anger themselves.
Yes,
they're not anger themselves. So another book I read years ago she has the phrase something like, what good thing are you cooking up with your anger today? And I've heard that 100 times in my brain since reading that years ago, because that's the point of anger. The point of anger is to cook up something good in our lives and in our relationships. We just haven't seen that modeled. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know healthy anger.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But the point of it, just like all the emotions, but it is the one that mobilizes us.
Okay.
It is the one that moves us into making a change or into growing or into learning or into connecting.
Yes. And that is one of the things which I do want us to move into, like, what are the needs of each emotion? So right now we're talking about anger, and the need of anger is to mobilize. It is to move. It's to take that action. Yeah. And the effects of that, when we experience anger for something and we're not taking action on it. And again, the action is not to yell or throw a chair across the room. The action is, what is the need here?
Yeah, exactly.
And when you're not, I think that not listening to your anger is extremely damaging. It's damaging for all of them, but anger, because it's secondary, it's the one that's like, no, dude, I'm here. I am telling you, like, I'm yelling at you right now to make a change.
Yeah.
Like,
I can resist that.
I think it's our body's last resort, even, because I can feel loneliness, and that's chronic pain. That's really damaging to our bodies. But when the anger hits over the loneliness, if I ignore that anger, it's like my body's like, okay, I'm giving up now.
Yeah.
What's the point? You're not even listening to me anymore. I'm giving up.
Yeah.
You get hives. Yeah. You get this bad thing coming because I moved you to anger and you ignored me and you didn't do anything. So I think anger is super important when we do experience it, to tap into it and then find out what's underneath the anger. I always love doing that with coaching. When they say, I feel angry about that, it's like, okay, let's keep going. What's the other driver to the anger, and find out what that need is. So let's go through each of them.
Okay, so we'll start with joy. That's at the top. So basically this is recorded as so what message is connected to the emotion, and then what need is connected to the message and the emotion, if that makes sense. But slow me down if it's not making sense. So joy, the message would be, that felt good, right? It's the pleasure center of the brain. It's telling us, oh, that was great. I like that. That was positive. The need connected to that is, I need pleasure to thrive. It's directly connected to thriving.
Yep. I want to talk about each of them just a little bit.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
And so that is something that I think about people that are living in chronic pain. It's so hard to touch into the joy. And the joy is such a motivator. That's something I have found, that when I am wanting to change a behavior or create new patterns, it's tapping into the joy of the change that actually helps motivate me forward.
Wow.
And even with my kids, like, and whenever I'm talking with people, if you want a behavior repeated, validate that behavior.
Right. Yeah.
That's honoring the joy that you're experiencing, and that's what can help create the thrive.
Yeah.
Without joy, we lose purpose, we lose motivation.
Definitely.
And so, yes, that need is, I need to thrive.
I need pleasure to thrive.
Pleasure to thrive. Yes.
It's all happening in the same part of the brain.
Yes.
Joy and pleasure, or joy is happening in the pleasure center of the brain. So the next one is anger. Basically, the anger is saying there's a problem. So then we have to engage, right? Like, well, okay, well, then what is the problem? But the need is, I need to power up for action. So the anger is meant to tell us, do something, right?
Yeah.
Do something to address this problem.
Yep.
And I know the first thought I have with that, because I've lived with so much fear and so much freeze, is not wanting to do the wrong thing, right? Having that perfectionism of, well, overthinking it, right? Or, well, it's better to do nothing, because what if I choose the wrong action? And that's definitely been a development for me over this past year of, I'm tired of that. I don't want to do that anymore. I would rather do the wrong action than no action. That's where I feel, that's where I'm at this point. Do I want to be reckless? No. Do I want to cause pain or harm? No. I have no interest in that.
Yeah.
But the idea of living in freeze, the idea of choosing no action because I'm not 100% confident that I'm choosing the right action, I can't do it anymore, right? 41 years is long enough. And so that's definitely been a shift for me over this past year of I'm going to just make mistakes. That's what's going to happen. And I'm going to go ahead and embrace that and decide that that's how this second, or however you want to say, like the next part of my life, this next season of my life, I would rather make mistakes than do nothing. So that's where I find myself right now. Okay. Do you want to add to that? Okay. The next one is fear. So basically fear is saying danger. I need to pay attention or take action for safety. So that's a great one from this morning, right? So my body was like, danger, there's a mouse. And then my body was sending, I would think adrenaline probably too. Like the way it was kind of this jittery, like needing to jump or needing to move backwards. So I need to pay attention and I need to take action for safety.
Yeah.
So I was on high alert for that moment. Right? High alert, there's a mouse. Oh, wait, it's not a mouse. Yeah. And then that kind of jittery feeling of like, I could sprint if I needed to sprint if it kept me safe.
Yeah.
Right? So all of those beautiful chemicals and hormones getting released into my body to say there is an active threat and we are going to mobilize you. The fear is mobilizing me and getting me to keep myself safe or to move myself to safety.
So one of the fears that I've seen come up again and again and again, it's when someone is experiencing an emotion and they want to share with their partner, but they have fear to share. And so the need there is like, how would you break that down?
As far as the taking action for safety?
Yes.
Ooh, that's hard.
I know it's a hard one, but I run into it again and again and again. Yes.
So one thing I would say, or the first thing that comes to mind, is the idea that the more we practice, the better at it we get.
Yeah. Just
like training for a marathon. Yeah. That first day going for a run is going to be the hardest.
Yeah.
And then once you're a day, a week, a month, a few months into the practice, into the new reality, into the new life of training for this marathon, it does get easier because your body adapts.
Yeah.
And it's the same with connection. It's the same with communication. Our bodies do adapt. And it doesn't mean we won't feel any level of fear, but my experience has been both personally and with the people I work with, the more you practice this new way of being and this new way of connecting, the more the fear comes down because the body adapts, because the brain adapts.
And I also think that there is space in honoring that emotion, but not letting it dictate your whole life. You know, in a way of what I have said is, does the risk, is it stronger than the fear itself? You know, of what is your level of safety with that person? You know, and so
that's a good point.
In that example, okay, is this someone that has held safe space for me previously? I have the fear in sharing.
Right.
But I can speak the truth of, okay, I'm never going to change where I'm at if I don't do this. So the risk is worth it.
Right.
It's vulnerable versus I'm not asking you to like go jump off of a cliff without a parachute. You know, that's a fear to like really pay attention to. But if you are in a relationship where that person is not safe, the risk may not be worth the vulnerability of sharing that, listening to that fear. But then there's other emotions there's other needs then you need to really tune into. If you are chronically living in unsafety, then there are other needs that you have. But when you're in safe relationship with someone, I still get hit with fear telling Wes processed something with me this week. And he's like, I have a lot of fear in sharing this with you. But him honoring the fear, saying that out loud.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. Starting the conversation with, I feel so much fear.
I feel so much fear. Yes. And then being able, the risk of him sharing, like we stayed connected, you know, it was worth it for him to get it out of his body and to honor that need. Yeah. And so I just know that that's one that a lot of people tune into of or experience the need in the fear.
Yeah.
So,
let's see. Hurt. So hurt, the message is pain. I'm experiencing pain. I need to eliminate, change, or move away from pain source. And of course, that can be physical pain or emotional pain. Interestingly, so I've definitely gotten pushback on that one. And it's come from people who know that there are certain practices in life that are uncomfortable but beneficial. So we could go back to the lifting weights idea or the training for a marathon idea, right? Lifting weights is uncomfortable. Like you could call it a painful, for me, there's also joy in it, which is why I do it. there's joy in the moment of it, and there's joy in how much better I feel when I am being active and moving my body just as a lifestyle. But you could also like really slow it down and break it down and go, that's not pleasure, right? Like lifting a heavy weight where you're straining and you're breathing and you're hot and sweaty, that's not really pleasure, or at least for a lot of us, it's not. And yet the logic side of me goes, right, but I want to be strong and I want to feel good and I want to be able to climb stairs and lift my baby. And so that overrides the discomfort because I believe that it's beneficial, right? Like my understanding is that this is a beneficial thing for my body and therefore I'm overriding the pain. So that's kind of the pushback I've gotten because there's other things too, like people who intermittent fast or people who prioritize certain practices, certain disciplines because they believe in them, because they believe, yes, this is uncomfortable, but my body benefits or my mind benefits. So I would throw that out there too, because I think that is a valid perspective. I think to say, I run and I lift weights and I'm going to keep doing that. I plan to keep doing that. So does that mean I'm ignoring my pain? Does that mean I'm repressing my pain? I don't think so. I think I'm aware and I'm processing and I am partnering with, right? I'm saying, yes, there is discomfort. There are moments of discomfort. And my current understanding is this is a beneficial thing to do. So there's also other times, like I know I work with a family who has a special or like high needs, special needs daughter where she needs 24/7 care. It's been a really, really, really hard journey, right? It's an incredibly painful journey for the entire family, the parents, the child, the siblings. So when you read that, how you could read it is, oh, well, then they need to move away from her. They need to not be near her, right? Because it's painful. No, they're going to keep taking care of her. It's their daughter, right? They're committed. They're committed to taking care of her needs, even though it's an incredibly painful situation. So there's also that where you have emotional pain and you're just going to keep doing it. You're going to keep loving the loved one, even though what's happening for the loved one and what's happening for the family is so incredibly painful. So there's also those situations.
And I think that goes even to what I was saying about fear. The way you said it is like the benefit of doing the action while processing the emotion outweighs the emotion like itself or like the stopping of the emotion. Like I can stop because of the emotion or I can keep going. Which one has a better benefit? And so there are times in our relationship where I need to keep going while processing the emotion because the benefit is so much greater. And because I also think on the flip side of that, there have been relationships that we have ended. Because the need was move away and the benefit of the relationship did not outweigh the risk of staying in, the pain that we were in. And so it really is this like personalized experience of where learning the emotions for yourself and what's happening in your own body. That's why it's so important because we can't blanket statement this for every time you feel hurt. For every time you feel fear, it's going to be very specific to each moment. And so being able to tune in, the more you do it, the faster it becomes and you can get to your needs faster.
I would also say like just with those two situations. So like the family who has the high needs, special needs daughter, one indicator would be we need more community support, right? Like this is so painful. Her needs are so great that just the two of us can't meet all of those needs. So you could say that, and in that case, you could say that that's changing the situation, right? Us just in this isolated nuclear family trying to meet all of her needs. It's too painful. It's too big. We need more support. We need more community. So that would be, I think, a way of saying, okay, so we're changing the situation. We can't eliminate it. Like we can't take this from her. We can't, right? We're stuck. She's stuck. So we're making the best of this really hard situation. We can't change that, but we can change the amount of support, or we can change how we care for her, how we meet her needs. And then the same with the workouts. Like one of the things I've done is Epsom salt baths. So another example, I think, where you're like, okay, I'm sore. So what's the need? Like, how could I support my body through this process? I wouldn't be doing that otherwise, right? And so that's another way where I think it's an example of change. Like, oh, okay, I'm changing my routine to support my body and doing this uncomfortable thing so that it's taking care of my health. And making me healthier and stronger.
So I love that.
think you can look at it that way too. But of course, that requires awareness and it requires curiosity.
Yeah.
Right? I have to be aware of the pain, and then I have to get curious about what the pain is telling me and how I can meet that.
Well, and then also willing to take action.
Yeah.
So it's the awareness, it's the curiosity, and it's the action of, okay, I need to get Epsom salts and I need to ask my partner, hey, I need this time to take this bath. That's what my body is needing right now.
Yeah.
And so being able to
Speaking
honor and speaking up to meet the need.
Absolutely. Okay. The next one is sad. So sad tells us that something is missing or damaged. And the need is, I need to acknowledge loss and try to adjust. So again, these are so general, like there's a million different situations. So I think when we hear the word sad culturally, we tend to think of grief.
Yeah.
But sad can also be triggered by other things that aren't like traditional grief, where we've lost something important or someone important. So for example, I remember processing with friends years ago. So like some of us are morning people, some of us are night owls, right? And morning people, in my experience, tend to be able to just kind of like jump up and get started, like get their day going. And then night owls can't. Like it's such a painful, sad experience.
So sad.
So sad. And so we were talking to some friends years ago, and she's more of a morning person, he's more of a night owl. And so he was describing the feeling of in the morning when they wake up, her turning the light on in the room. And he wasn't using the word sad because he didn't know that, but he was talking about how how overwhelming and horrible it is when she turns the light on in the room. And so then we were processing, okay, well, what core emotion is that? And realizing it's sad. Your body is experiencing sadness. Your body's experiencing pain. Like you're being triggered by the pain nerves, by the pain that's happening in your brain when she turns that bright light on in the morning. And so that's, I think, a reframe for most of us, because we hear sad and we think, oh, it was an event, or it was, I lost a loved one, or I lost a job, or I had to move when I didn't want to move, like some big life transition experience or event. When actually we can get hit with sad throughout the day with these little things like our wife turning on the light in the morning before we're ready to get going, before our eyes feel joy about light. Right. And so our body going, oh, this is just so sad. That the light is on.
Or you reach in your fridge to get that last bite of dessert and realize that your 8-year-old already ate it. And then I go, sad, sad.
Exactly.
Yeah, my 5-year-old, he'll go, sad. Yes. And so the need that something is damaged, something is missing. And so then asking yourself, how can I replace? How can I change? And then I'm sure people are asking, well, I've lost people, I've lost, it is the grief of this. The way to still incorporate, so telling stories. I hear Phyllis talk about the loss of her mom and how much it means to her when other people acknowledge, or, when y'all call her on her mom's, either the day of her passing, or it's having other people share in the story helps. It doesn't take the sadness completely away, but in that moment, it helps it feel like it's less intense. The intensity changes. So knowing the need of, I need to surround myself with reminders, images, stories.
And honor that.
And honoring
that experience, honor that relationship.
Yes, for sure.
Let's see. Lonely. Okay, so lonely says, I am alone. I need to find safe, authentic connection and support. So that was definitely a shift for me years ago, learning about the core emotions, because I find joy being alone, right? And recognizing that alone and lonely are two different things. I can feel lonely in a crowd. I can feel lonely at the dinner table with friends and family. I can feel joy when I'm alone, right? So it's like two different experiences. And then that was a really big shift for me too, is understanding that lonely is telling us, I need to be authentic. I need people in my life where I can say what's true for me or what's real for me. And that's why I can have 100 friends. But if I'm not allowed to tell them the truth, or I don't feel safe telling them the truth about who I am or how I feel or what I think or what I want, I'm still going to feel lonely. 100 friends isn't going to cut it. It's because it's not going to meet that need. Because the need is authentic connection. But the need is also support. So I've talked a whole lot about how lonely motherhood is because we have created a structured society where mothers are not supported, right? We are carrying way more than our share in raising the next generation than ever in history.
Yeah.
Ever in history.
Yeah.
And it's not sustainable, and we don't know how to do it because we weren't created to do it.
Yeah.
Right? We weren't created to have, you know what, I'm the mom, and yes, I have a lot of kids, but I'm going to meet all their needs. It is up to me. I'm the beginning, I'm the end. It is up to me to meet all 6 of their needs, right? We've never lived that way, ever in society. That's a brand new reality, and it's not how our brains and bodies were created.
Yeah.
It's not how humans were created. We weren't created to carry that much burden by ourselves. So that idea or that word, I think, is really important because some of it is authentic connection. It's being able to say, motherhood is painful. Motherhood is hard. Motherhood is exhausting, and have someone just regard my experience and not resist my experience, right? Yeah. So that's part of it. But it doesn't end there because I also need support. Like real, live, tangible, show up and change the diaper. Show up and drive the kid to practice, right? And so it's not just talking about, and I think that's where we fail as communities. First of all, we don't let moms talk about how hard it is, right? We resist. But if we do manage to allow a mom to express how hard motherhood is, that's as far as we get. We don't offer the help. We don't offer the support. We don't even know how to do that. We do not know how to show up for each other. And obviously I'm speaking in generalizations, and obviously there are exceptions to that. And I hope you guys are living the exception. I hope you get to experience the exception. But I talk to a lot of people, and it is an exception.
Yeah.
The majority of us are incredibly isolated and incredibly lonely and incredibly unsupported. And it's not just moms. Yeah. I work with moms, and I am a mom. So it's easy for me to access that story.
Yes.
It's other people too, of course.
Yeah.
But it's both. So it's being able to authentically share about how overwhelmed I am. And it's creating a life and connecting to a community where I also receive actual support. Tangible, practical, pragmatic, show up at my door support.
Yeah. Yeah. I see this a lot in the workplace as well, with people that I'm working with, as far as there's so much fear in asking for support. Oh, because we definitely, like, we've created a society for moms for sure. We've also created this society that's like, no, you should just be able to figure it out yourself.
Definitely.
Like
whatever
it is. Yep. And so with loneliness, we're also working remotely more, which I talked with Wes about this yesterday. There's so much joy in being able to work remote because it does offer up a lot of freedoms. But I do think that there's a lot of damage in it as well. Like this summer, I processed it on this podcast again and again and again. I was so lonely so it was the loneliest summer. And the problem was that I was processing it, but there was never that move to a need. Right. It was never, well, what do I need? It was, I never met the need. And so what would the need have been? And could I have even met it? What would that have looked like?
Right. Yeah.
So for me to even get creative about that, and it did finally, like, one of the areas that I needed support in is just like managing our house. And Wes is currently getting his pilot's license, like, flying all the time. So our budget is not in the space to have a house cleaner. Yeah. And it hit me months ago. We have every meeting for the connection codes here. We record every podcast here. Wow. I clean before your parents get here all the time. Yeah. And to run the house with 4 little kids in it and do all the work and make sure the house is clean for them, which not that was their expectation, you know. And it finally hit me, oh my gosh, this could be a business expense. This could be a business expense. The connection codes could pay for me to have a house cleaner because I'm drowning over here. And it still took me months to get the courage to ask. Yeah. And I knew the need. I knew the answer to the need. And still. Yeah. And I'm a connection coder that does this every week, you know?
It's so deep in there.
So deep in there, those patterns of not asking for support. And of course, long story short, I eventually say to Phyllis after I have a mental breakdown, the next day we're on the phone and I was like, I'm thinking about maybe a house cleaner. And there was no question. It was like, call today, get someone today. Yeah. And so it's even for myself, why did it take me so long? Fear, and so it's like not processing all the way through. And so as people are listening to this, when they're like, well, I don't even know what the support would be, really getting to coming up with solutions and then processing the fear of asking for the support.
Yeah.
And so the conversation I think I even had with Phyllis is like, I have fear in asking, but I need to I literally went through the emotions and I was met on the other side with a safe person, And so I think there are times where when we have the need, there's vulnerability in asking for the need.
Oh, yeah.
So even processing the emotion around the vulnerability is a layer to it. But the outcome, this is the benefit worth the risk?
Right.
And when we can say the benefit is worth the risk of this need getting met 1,000 times, that's what your body is asking for.
Yeah.
And so is there anything left before we go into the core emotion wheel that is lingering? Do we hit all of them?
No, we have 2 more.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
What else do we have?
You can do those real quick?
Yeah.
Well, guilt and shame.
Oh, okay.
So guilt would be I caused harm. I need to change my action or my expectation. I think when we first created this years ago, it just said I need to change my action. And then we started talking about mom guilt and how much guilt we carry for things that aren't actually harming our kids.
Yeah.
And how we are trying to do it all when no one's really benefiting from us trying to do it all.
Yeah.
And so we added or expectation. So sometimes it is, I need to change my action. An easy example, my 5-year-old hits their sibling. Hopefully she feels guilt that she hit her sibling so that she'll stop hitting her sibling, right? Hopefully she will learn from that guilt and listen to that guilt and stop hitting her sibling.
Yeah.
So that would be where she needs to change the action, right? But sometimes it's expectation, like this idea of whatever, I need to cook, 4 meals a day for all 8 of the members of my family. I need to make sure I'm packing all of those lunches. And even if that literally takes all of my time and energy, that's what I need to be doing, or maybe not. Or maybe there's a reframe. Maybe there's another way to look at that. Maybe there's a way to get the need met. So what's the need? The need is that they eat. First of all, just that they eat. Ideally, they're eating nutritious food, right? Is there a way to eat or to fill the need of them eating and of them eating nutritious food without me spending every second of my day in the kitchen? Is that possible?
Yeah.
If I don't want to. There's some moms who love to cook. My 11-year-old, it's like the joy of her life is to cook. So she spent her summer cooking.
Yeah.
It's not my joy. Right?
Yeah.
Like she's obsessed with it. It's her hobby. So yeah, she'll happily spend all day in the kitchen, experimenting and trying and feeding. She's like, try this, try this, try this. She's walking around the house offering the food to everybody. It's her joy. And that's true for some people. And that's true for some women or some moms, some parents. And there's others where I feel like, like I am dying. I'm spending every second in the kitchen and I am dying.
Yes.
And so that's where, is there a reframe? Is there a way to get this need met? Because the need is not that I'm in the kitchen 24/7. The need is that my family is fed. The need is that my children are eating, hopefully at least one nutritious meal a day, right? Yeah. Yeah. And so is there another way?
Some good vitamins for those who are not.
Who are not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is there another way to meet that need? So that's where I think the expectation comes in of like so much guilt that I'm not cooking everything from scratch. Okay. So then do you need to start cooking everything from scratch? Or do you need to maybe change that expectation of cooking everything from scratch?
Yeah.
And you have to answer that for yourself, right? You're the only one who can answer that. And then shame, I am flawed and unworthy. I need compassion and unconditional love. That's another one we've gotten pushback on because we've definitely been conditioned to believe, first of all, that we really are unworthy, right? I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of care. So most of us believe that pretty deeply. But we've also been conditioned to believe that compassion is creates lazy, selfish humans, right? That compassion and unconditional love create lazy, selfish humans. And so therefore that's like not loving or not, I know in parenting that comes up a lot. Like if I extend compassion to my kid, they're going to grow up and be a bad person.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of the core beliefs, the cultural core beliefs that most of us or a lot of us carry. So we've gotten pushback on that too of like, wait a minute, you get hit with shame and you need compassion as a response. But believe it or not, modern research and ancient wisdom teaches us that, in fact, it's, I talk a lot about the psyche being like a garden. And so it's actually, compassion would be like rich soil, right? So if we want to grow a flourishing garden, if we want to grow a flourishing human, we need good soil, and compassion is good soil. And that's something we have to kind of examine culturally, examine that core belief of like, okay, first of all, where did we get that? Where did that come from? Yeah. And second of all, is it true? And if it's not true, then what is true?
Yeah.
And what does create thriving humans?
Yeah.
So that's really what this all comes back to, right? Connection codes. We want thriving humans, thriving relationships. That's why we're doing all of this. All this work, all this podcasting, all of the coaching and the therapy, like it all comes down to, we want the next generation to get to thrive. We want to heal the relationships we're all in right now, and heal the trauma or the unprocessed emotions or
and
the disconnections and the isolations and the patterns. Yeah.
Yes.
So kind of all comes down to that.
I love that. Thank you so much. Now, we are going to move into the core emotion wheel, which is the 4-minute tool that Dr. Glenn and Phyllis created that actually helps you with that first step, which is accessing the emotion. Yeah. You can't get to the need if you can't access the emotion. And so that really is what like our foundations course, I refer to that as like our 101. You know, you have to get really good at accessing and identifying the emotion before we can get to the meeting of the need. And we want to move more into that part of it and even changing the thoughts around things. But accessing the need happens when you actually practice it. It's building that muscle. And this tool is a 4-minute tool that actually helps you build that emotional muscle. So this work we're doing, it actually can come so much faster the more you do it. Oh, yeah. And so I think there are probably people that are listening and be like, that sounds like it's going to take that was a lot of questions I have to ask myself. Things happen to me very quickly now. I can access the emotion. I can access the need so much faster than I could previously.
Let's see. Well, I'm going to start with an easy one. I'm going to start with fear because I thought there was a mouse on my counter this morning.
Yeah.
And I felt so much fear. And that was a wild experience and an amusing experience. Let's see. Anger. I've been experiencing anger in my marriage lately. We've been making some changes and I would call it core. Well, it's both. It's secondary anger, but it's also core anger of just like this deep motivation to grow and this deep motivation to process and to communicate and to move in a way that like I mentioned several times, you know, my default setting is freeze. My default setting is to just kind of try to be as small and quiet and convenient as possible. That's my default setting. And so these last few months, I have felt a lot more core anger of like, no, it's time to grow. It's time to communicate and connect and grow in a way that is uncomfortable for me. So that's an anger I've been experiencing pretty consistently for about 2 months now. And it's created a lot of growth and a lot of connection. And it's been hard, very hard and very good. Very, very good. Okay, lonely. I already mentioned this, but it comes up all the time. Like just the loneliness of managing our home and our family and our kids. And thankfully, I have a spouse who partners with me where we are able to talk about it. And he's incredibly supportive. And like, there has to be solutions. Like we've got to figure out solutions. So I feel supported by him in that. But there's times where kind of like you were saying, either I don't know what the solution is, or it's just so hard to ask for that. You know, it's so hard to just do it, just do the thing. So we've been processing that a lot continually. Like, how do we create a more supported life together in our family? So just the loneliness of motherhood and home management, that would kind of be the two things that come to mind first. Sad. So through all the processing that my spouse and I have been doing, we've been also processing past wounds. And we've talked a lot about how, like, even though there's things that happened years ago or decades ago, our bodies don't live in time. Our minds live in time. Our bodies don't live in time. And so my body doesn't know that wound happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And so when we are talking about it and processing it, just the flood of sadness that my body has felt of some of those past traumas or past wounds or past disconnections. We've been dealing with them more head on than we usually do. So processing lots and lots of sadness from years of unmet needs and just a lack of connection, or at least a lack of depth of connection. So sadness there. What's the other one? Hurt. Oh man, I would say my spouse and I are hurting each other on a regular basis right now because we're just kind of stumbling through trying to open cans of worms we don't always touch. So there's been lots of pain in that, but so good. Like we are on the same team with this as far as like, okay, we're in a season where we're ready to grow. We're ready to address some stuck places and some things that we don't always face head on. But it's messy. So we're hurting each other. We're having hard conversations and he's hurting me and I'm hurting him and we're not trying to. But it's just, the messy process of being honest, the messy process of saying what we're really experiencing and what we really need and what we really want. So it's been a wild few months. Lots of hurt. Let's see. Now I'm stuck.
Guilt.
Guilt for hurting my spouse. Guilt that me being honest about how I feel about certain things causes him pain. Yeah. Definitely guilt because I don't want to hurt him. That's never my interest. That's never my desire. I really love him and like him and care about him. And we've been together a really long time and we had some really bad patterns in the early years. Yeah. And so being honest about that and dealing with that and changing that is painful. Yeah. So guilt that I cause him pain. Shame, I would say, just kind of around the idea, because a lot of what we've talked about, so we've been processing hurt, but we've also been being really honest about what we want. Tons of shame that I want, right? Tons of shame that I need. Yeah. And I'm expressing lots of needs right now and lots of wants right now. And I could just like melt and disappear into that cauldron of shame. So that's been coming up too. All the emotions.
All the emotions.
Yes. All the emotions.
And did you say joy?
Joy is, I usually do joy last, I think, just because it helps me where I'm like, oh, that was all so much. And then the joy feels like we're going to be okay. Yeah. But honestly, again, about my spouse and I and all, we're processing so much joy that I have a partner who's processing with me. Yeah. That he's willing, that he's showing up, that he's being vulnerable, that he's hearing me. Yep. As painful and hard as it feels, so much joy that I'm partnered with someone who's showing up in that way and on the team and on the same page with me in that way. And so much joy about the growth I'm experiencing through that hard process. Yeah. Just like it reminds me again of the working out idea of like, it's uncomfortable, it's hard, but to see yourself able to lift heavier and heavier weights, so exciting. Like to feel the strength in your arms and back is so exciting. And that's how it's feeling right now in my relationship. Hard conversations, but also noticeable growth. Yeah. And there is immense joy in that. So.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm not going to share today because we are at our time. Okay. And I want to honor what you said because that reminds me of something that has to do with the needs, is that this journey isn't about you aren't going to live a pain-free life by doing this work. Yeah. And there are going to be times that you even have situations where you're kind of creating pain to get to the joy. It's for a purpose. Yes. And for us, the goal is to stay connected. And so like hearing what you're talking about with you and your spouse, it's like y'all are going through this super painful process, but you're doing it together. It's a connection. It's a connected journey of it. And that is our goal. That is our goal, for you to live in connection with the other person. And so, with Wes and I's season right now, logistically, like things are complete chaos. We have a lot going on, and I can't just eliminate. I'm not going to stop doing the connection codes tomorrow. Yeah. That's the easy option. That's the pain-free option. Right. And he's not going to stop trying to become a pilot. Right. But we can do this connected to each other. So we're not going to eliminate our pain. We're going to honor our needs. We're going to support each other in those needs. We're going to hear each other, be safe spaces for each other, and stay connected during these seasons. Yeah. Because that alone helps reduce the pain tremendously.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
The years where we were living like this and not connected. Oh yeah. 1,000 times more painful. And so when we talk about our pain now, it on the scale, it is still so much more gentle than where we were, at least for me, 10 years ago before this work. Yeah. Because I'm doing it with someone who's partnered with me.
Yeah. Well, and I would also add staying connected to yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's directly affects the entire process. And it's such an important part of it. that if I'm betraying myself or ignoring myself or being not honest about myself or with myself, that makes the connection with my spouse really, really hard.
Right.
And that's actually one of the things we've been processing, where he's like, I'm terrified to just be honest and real and open, right? I mean, we both are.
Yeah.
Most of us are. And he just keeps insisting, like, I just need you to be open and honest. Like, we're going to get through it. And I just need you to be real about who you are and be honest about what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
But it's all interconnected of like, for me to be honest with him, I have to be honest with myself first, right? If I'm not honest with myself, how can I be honest with him? How can I tell him what's real for me or what's happening for me if I'm not admitting it to myself either?
Yeah.
So we're relearning that. We already know all this stuff, but I feel like it's a continual like, oh, right.
Yes.
This is how it works. This is what it takes.
Yes.
So it's like we're remembering, relearning, doing it again, reprocessing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to be honest with me first to be able to be honest with him and be real with him. So
no, I think that's so incredible and so powerful. Like, I'm so glad that you said that, because that is so true. It does. It starts with within ourselves, being able to access that emotion, identify the emotion, access it, and then honoring the need and really not skipping that step, because that is where the change, the goal of emotion, the purpose of emotion is to create motion. And that's where you're going to get. That's how you're going to grow. That's how you're going to become the version of yourself that you want to be, where you can find that joy and thrive from that pleasure. And so if you are like, I need these written down somewhere, there'll be a link in the show notes where it'll just be a simple PDF where you can see the messages of the emotions and the need. So what Echo read off today, you can get that from us through clicking in the show notes. And Echo, how can people find you if they want to connect with you?
So I just have a link tree. I don't even have a website yet. It's been on my to-do list for years and years. And is that something we can link as well?
Yes.
The link tree. Okay. Because that will show, like, I write as well. I write and I coach. And it'll have all the links to like the masterclass that I partnered with you guys with, the newsletter that I write, the coaching, one-on-one coaching and group coaching that I do. Yeah. All of that is in my link tree. So we'll Echo Hill Vetter. So you could Google that link tree, Echo Hill Vetter.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Just click under the podcast. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you. Genuinely, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing this. I think it is incredibly vital to this work and so much of what you said today. And to our listeners, thank you for showing up. For those of you that have been leaving us your reviews, yes.
So encouraging.
So encouraging. And so if you have not yet, leave us a 5-star review. We are at the end of the month. So each month we are going to send out a little piece of merch, either our mug, a magnet, to someone that has emailed in a photo of their review. So go ahead and do that. And Glenn and Phyllis aren't here. So are you ready to do our thing? Which you don't like they say, you need this.
You deserve this. Let's do this.
Let's do this.
There you go. You reminded me.